This podcast is intended to provide information for educational purposes only and to serve as a starting point for you to have a conversation with your personal physician. Nothing stated on this podcast should be considered medical advice. Consult with your physician before undertaking or changing any treatment plan.
There was some initial thoughts with GLP-1s that there was an increased risk of suicide if you were taking Ozempic. That was a big thing that came out. And so that was kind of rumored, and there was very, very flimsy evidence to support it. And so there was a ton of deep dives and really a lot of analysis into whether this is true. And it turns out not only is it not true, but the opposite is true.
Well, hello and welcome back to our show, the Pound of Cure Weight Loss Podcast. We are on episode 35, Happiness in a Syringe. What makes you happy?
I mean, for me, it's family is kind of the first thing. I just love spending time with my family, just whatever I can just get them alone, no phones, no nothing. All four of us are kind of stuck together. Even if it sucks, that makes me happy. They're like, thanks, Dad. But, just being around with my family where that's all we're doing is just spending time with each other, that kind of makes me really happy. I just read an article I thought that was really interesting. It was someone who was fairly successful in life, and they kind of look back at some times in their life when they were their happiest. And they comment on the fact that it wasn't now when they were so successful that they were actually the happiest. It was when they were younger, and I think this person went on a mission trip. They were Mormon, and they went, on the 2-year mission trip. And they were just dedicated to serving others, just completely and totally dedicated to the cause. And I think something that also makes me really happy is like if I'm in surgery and it's a really hard surgery, really challenging, but I'm just super dialed in and focused and it's going well. And I see what's going to happen. I know all of the steps. I know what needs to be done. I know it's going to come out the way I want it to be. I love that. That just makes me so happy to know that, first of all, I'm super focused. I'm putting a ton of energy in, but I know I'm going to solve this problem for this person that has just been, terrifying them and causing them so much grief and misery. And I know it's going to come out okay.
Yeah,
and
that
I love that. I love that
else.
moment. I love that moment. Anyway, what makes you happy, Zoe?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we all can kind of feel that sense of happiness and fulfillment in that same thing, your family. I don't have a family of my own quite yet, but
kind of do.
Yeah,
got a husband.
Well, yeah, but no, thinking about spending time with the people that you love, whether it's my husband, my parents, my sister, my best friends. It's like that sense of having people who you love and that you can just be.
They have your back.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, at your wedding, I really felt that you have a lot of those people actually.
Very, very.
Yeah, you have a lot of those people in your life, and they were all just so happy for you.
Yeah.
And they just all had your back. Just being with those people who you don't have to question it. You know that they have nothing but your best interest. Just spending time with those people, being around them. That's happiness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
You can't. Consumption's not going to get you there.
No.
Everybody tells us that.
And also the helping other people, the servitude to other people. You were explaining the moment in surgery that brings you a lot of joy. When people, whether it's our patients or other people that just basically come to me and share how much I've changed their life.
Yeah.
There's nothing that beats that feeling, and knowing that the passion and the love that I have for what we do and seeing that translated into somebody's life being changed. Yeah. I mean, that is a true feeling of joy that
every week. We have someone this week.
Yeah.
Who that's exactly what she's going to say.
Exactly.
So, all right. Well, enough about our happiness.
And we would actually love for you to comment what makes you happy. So if you're watching on YouTube or wherever you're consuming this, if you can leave a comment and share with us what makes you happy, what brings you joy, we'd love to hear from it.
Love to hear that for sure. All right. Well, let's talk about your happiness. And specifically in the news article is from New Scientist, and it's something that we've been hearing a ton about, and it's the surprising mental health and brain benefits of weight loss drugs. And what this article talks about, this is something we've been seeing a ton of because we spend all day really speaking to a lot of patients either who've had bariatric surgery or who are on GLP-1 medications. These medications definitely have some impact. There was some initial thoughts with GLP-1s that there was an increased risk of suicide if you were taking Ozempic. That was a big thing that came out. And so that was kind of rumored, and there was very, very flimsy evidence to support it. And so there was a ton of deep dives and really a lot of analysis into whether this is true. And it turns out not only is it not true, but the opposite is true.
Yeah.
And so there are GLP-1 receptors throughout your brain. And so this article points to a study that was done in the Boston area, and they took Epic records. So Epic is the electronic medical record that's used by most people.
We used to use it.
We used to use it. I use it in the hospital. Our hospital uses it, so we still use it. But there's a huge, just an enormous amount of data in Epic. And so they looked at diabetics who were taking semaglutide or Ozempic, and they found that they were 37% less likely to be diagnosed with depression. So a lot of doctors' offices, when you have a visit, they'll send you a little questionnaire, and it's like, do you feel sad? Do you feel hopeless? Do you feel, all these things? And my doctor, I get a survey like that probably every 6 months or so. And so they looked at these surveys, and they found that if you are taking semaglutide, you're less likely to answer that survey in a manner consistent with someone with depression, less likely to be diagnosed with depression and given a prescription for a new depression medication. So that's pretty fascinating. And so the question is why? Why is this true? First of all, this is, again, we've talked about this before. This is correlation. It doesn't prove causation. But whenever you see correlation, you always want to ask yourself, is there a reasonable pathway where this could be true? And so we do know that GLP-1 medications increase flow of blood to the brain. They also reduce oxidative stress. So there's a lot of talk now and some studies being done about Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's. And there's one study that followed people with Parkinson's disease over a year, and they found no progression in their symptoms. In the control group, their symptoms worsened. So we're seeing evidence that this can slow the progression of Parkinson's, which is essentially an inflammatory disease of the brain. I think another thing to keep in mind about all these meds is that not all GLP-1 meds cause weight loss. So we are all focused on Ozempic, semaglutide, and tirzepatide, but the truth is there's probably another dozen or so of these meds, and they don't cause weight loss. And so that's also something interesting to keep in mind, is that some of these meds may be great for patients who we don't want to lose weight, but we do want some of these Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, depression effects. So Novo Nordisk does have a trial coming out in 2025 looking at Alzheimer's, and the likely result is that these meds will reduce the progression of Alzheimer's disease. In 80,000, another study, there's 80,000 medical records, semaglutide was associated with a 50% lower incidence of alcohol use disorder. So we've talked a lot about alcohol on the show. We talked about it last episode. We have absolutely seen this. Actually, just today, I had a patient, really complicated patient. He came in with a bleeding ulcer from alcoholism after a gastric bypass. I saw him 6 months ago. I think I did a surgery probably a year ago I did a surgery. And so he had this bleeding ulcer. And so we had two options. We could either kind of revise and resect the ulcer and revise the gastric bypass. What I talked to him about was reversing the gastric bypass. And so we reversed the gastric bypass, and he's actually now alcohol-free. And today we just got him started on Wegovy as an adjunct to help some of the weight gain that happened after reversal, but also to help reduce his desire for alcohol use. So we have seen that over and over again, that these meds will reduce your drive for alcohol. They're also really interesting, being shown to reduce binge eating disorder. And so there is a drug available for treatment of binge eating disorder. It's Vyvanse, same thing used for ADHD. And in a study of comparing liraglutide, which is also known as Saxenda or Victoza, and it's the daily use, it's kind of one notch down from Ozempic in terms of efficacy. They saw 40% reduction for cravings for opioids at a residential drugs treatment center.
That's huge.
So people in a drug treatment center trying to recover, 40% reduction in cravings for drugs. So we're seeing all of these things. And I think another crazy, interesting, and really, really important component of this is that up until now, pretty much all of the medications that we have to treat bipolar disorder, depression, carry some risk of weight gain. Not all of them, but we've talked a lot about weight gaining medications, and psych medications are at the top of the list. Medications like Seroquel, Abilify, Geodon, all of these medications can cause weight gain. And so now we may have some options for treating depression that not only don't cause weight gain, but they cause weight loss. And so these are really, really interesting findings there. And to me, I think number one, there's a physiologic mechanism. So I think that's important. You want to make sure that whatever you're seeing, that it makes sense medically. And number two, it also is what I'm seeing in the office. And that's something I've kind of learned over the years is like, the research should also, you should be observing some of that in your office. Like you're smart enough, we see enough patients, we can pick up on what's happening. We listen to our patients. And so we're seeing this in the office. We're seeing people talk to us about less drive for alcohol. We're using it truthfully for patients who are over consuming alcohol. So fantastic study, really interesting. It just shows you that these medications are going to transform healthcare.
Absolutely. And it'll be really interesting to see over the next several years what access, availability, coverage might look like for some of these other diseases that, whether it's used for weight loss in addition to or not, just kind of what that looks like over the next decade or so.
I mean, it's going to be interesting. We're in for a wild ride, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. So our patient story today is Deborah, and she's actually our first nutrition-only patient. And our philosophy in our office is that we're really looking to drive positive metabolic changes. We're looking to drive these through bariatric surgery. We're looking to drive these through GLP-1 medications, and we're looking to drive these through lifestyle, through exercise, and also through nutrition. And I think we're going to hear from Deborah some of the positive effects that nutrition has had on her. Mm-hmm. So welcome, Deborah.
All right. Well, I'm super excited to welcome you to the show. Thanks for making it in.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, of course. We've spent a lot of time together on Zoom, but this is our first time seeing each other in person.
That's right. That's right.
We'd love to have you just kind of tell us your story. What brought you to the practice and kind of what brought you to where you're at right now?
Okay. Well, a friend of mine is a patient of Dr. Weiner and spoke very highly of you and the practice, and you as well.
She's been on the podcast.
I just saw that. I can't wait to watch the whole thing. So I've been pretty much a lifelong dieter and most of the time discouraged with my progress. And when Bev told me about the Pound of Cure book, I thought, okay, I'll check it out. So I read the whole thing, and I thought it was a lot of really good information that really made sense to me. But when I looked over the metabolic reset diet, I thought, wow, it's pretty restrictive. I don't know if I can do this or if I can do it for that long, because with other diets, I'd maybe do it for a week or two and then just blow it off, get discouraged. So in February, I started the Pound of Cure diet, and I really like it. I realized how few vegetables I was eating. I've always think of myself as a healthy eater, but I realized I was eating a lot of stuff that was addictive and a lot of processed food. I mean, I wasn't the worst eater, but I realized that there's a lot of stuff I needed to cut out. And it's not been that hard to cut those things out. I was really hooked on Diet Coke. And the book is really good. It gives
Thank
you good ideas of why you don't want to eat or drink these things. Because I always thought, well, there's no calories. What's the big deal? And I can tell now once in a while I may have one and it's like I instantly want to have another one.
Yeah.
And so I'm really glad that, I'm not hooked on that anymore.
So you think you've been able to break some of these addictions to food?
Yes.
Talk to us a little bit more about that. Like, what were you addicted to? What was easy to break? What do you still struggle with a little bit?
Well, sugar is my biggest addiction.
Me too.
It's a really tough one. I've tried a lot of things. And I was using artificial sweeteners a little bit.
Yeah.
And now I really do not like the taste. Once in a while, something will, I'll end up eating something and it's like, ooh, no.
Yeah.
It tastes really bad. So I don't want to eat that. I've been really happy with the unlimited fruit aspect.
It's not nice, especially peach and nectarine season.
Yes.
I love peaches and nectarines.
And cherries.
And cherries.
Cherries are great.
Yeah. But they're so high in sugar.
Yeah, I know. They're so fattening.
Yes. You're learning.
Yeah. So, but it helps me not to be craving the full-on processed sugar and ice cream and those kinds of things. That being said, I do treat myself special occasions because I've learned that it's okay. You don't have to do this 100%. That's one thing that got me so discouraged on other diets and programs I've tried is there just seemed to be a lot of a sense of failure and just feeling like I can't do it. I'm never going to get it. What's wrong with me? Why am I so addicted to food? Well, now I've learned that a lot of the addiction is in the processing and the salt and the sugar.
So give us some examples of what you're eating. I think a lot of people on the metabolic reset diet, they kind of get into it and they get into this rut where they're just eating the same thing over and over and over again. What are some dishes that you found that are easy to make and really convenient and that you really enjoy?
Well, for breakfast, most of the time I eat 2 eggs and 6 to 8 ounces of veggies.
Yeah.
Either cooked in with the eggs or steamed and then eaten separately.
Yeah.
Because I just have to get that bolus of vegetables going early to make the 16 ounces.
Have you tried kale and eggs?
No.
Kale and eggs is delicious.
Is it? I haven't had that.
Yeah.
Does when you cook it with the eggs, can it break down the?
No, I do like over easy eggs, and then I'll kind of like steam the kale on the side. Maybe like use a little bit of the butter that I use for the egg to kind of also saute the kale. Kale and eggs is delicious. Yeah.
Well, I do fresh spinach.
Yeah.
And
same idea.
Some tomatoes and some
and that's
peppers.
a great breakfast. I mean, what a great breakfast. What a good way to start your day. You get a little bit of protein, right, Zoe? Protein
I have
in the
veggie
morning.
and eggs almost every morning. Same thing.
Yeah.
And it holds me for hours.
Yeah, because you get the protein. What's your magic formula? Protein plus fiber?
Amen.
Yeah.
Yes, for sure. And I usually have a piece of fruit after each meal.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times at lunch, I'm really not that hungry. And so I'll have like an apple and 2 tablespoons of peanut butter. And Zoe suggested, maybe adding some boiled eggs to that to get a little protein in there. But then at dinner, I've been doing different recipes from the book, the Bariatric Surgery book. I got that too. And some recipes I've gotten from you. And I went to a class at one of the local hospitals, and they had speakers on plant-based diet.
Oh, yeah.
And it was really good, a lot of information and a lot of recipes. So I've made a few of those. But fortunately, I love beans. So it's easy I can just open a can and just eat them as is. They don't have to be doctored up at all. But I like making soups. Really, I've always loved soups.
Yeah.
And so chili and just lots of vegetables and sweet potatoes and maybe some quinoa, some peppers.
That's a great thing about soup is you can just put whatever you want in it.
I had some leftover soup that I made in November that I had in the freezer, and I was like, well, this is what I'm having for lunch today.
There we go.
It tasted old. Well, I'm really glad that you were able to come and share your experience. And I just think that, like I said, you've really been able to modify this for your life in a sustainable way. And you've seen all of these really great positive benefits. And I think that's really wonderful.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming, Deborah. This was awesome. I'm so proud of everything you've accomplished. I think, everybody kind of assumes as you get older that you're supposed to get less and less healthy. And I think you're showing that doesn't have to be the case, that you can turn your health around. You can feel younger at an older age. So congrats on that.
Well, I am really motivated to stay healthy because there's a lot of things I still want to do. And I have 4, pretty young grandkids.
Oh, fun.
And it takes a lot of energy to keep up with them.
Yeah.
It's a strong why.
Yes. There you go.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Well,
thanks.
I'll see you on Zoom.
Okay. Thank you so much
Thanks for being here.
for
All right, we'll see you.
everything.
That was great. I really love spending my time with Deborah because she's been so participatory in the nutrition program. And I just love how she's been able to change her whole style of eating and see so many great benefits metabolically and mentally too,
Yeah.
So moving on to our nutrition segment today. It has to do with a reframe. So a lot of what I do is obviously nutrition and exercise, but also a piece of the puzzle that I find really powerful and important is working towards healing the relationship with food and our mindset and our self-talk and all of these kind of more complicated and ingrained thoughts that we have about food and how we talk to ourselves. So many times I offer reframes to patients. And so one that I have been helping a lot of people through lately that I wanted to share on the show today is think about a barrier to maybe exercising or a barrier to meal prepping, right? A lot of times it's, I don't have time,
Right.
I'm too busy.
Yeah.
I would like to go for a walk, but I'm too busy. I'd like to go to the grocery store. I want to go to the gym, but I don't have time or whatever it is, right? So I encourage you to reframe that, swap out that phrase of I don't have time or whatever that piece is, right? And replace it with it is not my priority. So I want to go to the gym, but it's not my priority. Whew.
Yeah.
All of a sudden
Lame
that
excuse.
sits different, right?
Yeah,
it hits
totally.
different. So I've had a couple people come back and tell me I actually used that the other day. And I was like, no, actually it is my priority. And so I'm going to go do it.
Yeah.
So just kind of think about that next time you're kind of running through these excuses in your mind or you feel like you don't have time. And if it truly is not your priority, then fine. Then you're not going to do it.
Yeah.
But if you want to make it your priority, you need to change the language and your thought patterns around it.
Yeah. I think that's also really important, and again, not to kind of stereotype the relationships and families, but for moms, right? Because moms essentially look at it like, okay, my priority is everybody else's priority. Well, that's my number 1, 2, 3, 4 priorities, right? And, moms are kind of constantly putting everybody before themselves and their needs before their own. And I think it's so important that moms also, you got to put your own oxygen mask on first. And so looking at it as a priority, not like this impossible thing, which I think is a great idea. I love how you've done that. It really works well in that scenario.
Absolutely.
Right?
I always like to say you can't pour from an empty cup.
Yeah.
If you're a mom, you want to show up for your kids, your family. You want to be the best version of you that you can be, but you cannot do that if you're not first taking care of yourself.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people think, well, I want my child to be like to exercise and to love physical fitness. And so I'm going to take them to soccer practice and take them to gymnastics and do all of this stuff. That's probably a lot less likely to make your child be physically fit and active than just you exercising and showing. Kids don't listen to a word you say, but they watch everything you do.
Yeah.
And so if you want your child to be physically fit and physically active, I think that's a great thing. Is if I want my child to eat well, I should eat well. If I want my child to be physically fit, I should be physically fit. And so making those things your priority is actually helping your children.
Absolutely. I love that perspective.
Yeah. All right. So our economics of obesity segment is something we talk about a lot, and it's compounded medications. So I did a little bit of research on what's available in terms of compounded medications. And so I looked at 2 companies. The first is Henry Meds, and the second is Ro. And these are both pretty popular options, and they're all over Google and social media and everything. And some of they have decent programs. And my guess is because they're spending so much money on advertising, they're probably heavily funded by somebody. I don't know if they're profitable or not, but there's money there, that's for sure. Whether they're making it or just being given it, I don't know, but there is money. So first, let's look at Henry Meds. So the first thing about Henry Meds is that they dose semaglutide by unit. So there's the traditional way that semaglutide is dosed is by milligram. So when you buy Ozempic or Wegovy, it's 0.25 milligrams, 0.5, 1 milligram. And so I'm immediately suspicious when something is dosed by unit. A unit is more of like an enzymatic measurement. So they would talk like the amount of enzyme to create this many chemical reactions. That's kind of how units are typically used in medicine. Like insulin is dosed as units. And the reason for that is because it's a preparation, and preparations are to some degree have some impurity. And so you measure the activity, and that's how you dose it. And so that ensures that if the insulin is made one way versus the other, if it comes from a pig versus a cow source or wherever they're getting the insulin, that you can compare them as apples to apples.
Because you might have different number of milligrams in each unit based on the source.
Exactly. So 100. So there's no reason to use units for semaglutide. All of the research, everything's been done on milligrams. If it's a pure compound and you're doing it on that, then it should be dosed on milligrams. So immediately, I don't like it. It's like, what's going on here? There's only one reason to put units up, and it's to somehow hide something. And so that, to me, just that alone, I've looked at that, and that is very worrisome. Now they say, and I looked through their website to try to find some, like, how many units is a milligram? It's like buried somewhere. It's not that easy to find, but they say 5 units is 0.25, 10 units is 0.5, and 20 units is 1 milligram. And they mix it with cyanocobalamin. Do you know what cyanocobalamin is called?
B12?
Yes, B12. I figured you'd know that one. So they mix it with, they call it cyanocobalamin, right? But it's vitamin B12, like you can get at the drugstore for pennies, right? And so they have to do that because that's how they get around the patent regulations. And again, we've talked about compounding a lot, and I'm not violently opposed to it. I understand the role for it. I understand why it's out there. I'm not saying it has to go away. It just makes me a little nervous for my patients. It's not something I've chosen to prescribe.
Right.
So it costs $197 for the first month and then $297. If you go over 20 units, it's $397. So let's call it $300 a month for either 0.5 or 1 milligram. If we look at Ro meds, they do dose it by milligrams. So that I think that gives them a heads up.
Okay.
It's pricey. It's $145 a month. That does not include the meds.
So what does that include?
That's just the visits and the nutrition and whatever they offer. That makes our nutrition program look super cheap, right? Yeah. And then it's $299 a month for the compounded semaglutide. And they only go up to 1 milligram, I believe. And so you're spending, at this point, $445 for the compounded per month to participate in Ro. That's a lot of money. If let's say we just go, and we've talked about counting clicks in the past. If we go on GoodRx and we buy an 8 milligram pen, that's the highest dose. And again, you got to find a doctor who's willing to prescribe you this and allow you to participate in the counting clicks thing. But it's $975 for 8 milligrams. And if we do the math on that, if we're at 0.25 milligrams, which is the starting dose, the 5 units in the Henry meds, or it's only $125 a month.
But most people don't see results on 0.25.
They do not. You're right. So we go up to 0.5. It's 16 doses, almost 4 months. It's $250 a month. So you can get real Ozempic. If you're on 0.5 of Ro meds, you can get real Ozempic for cheaper.
If you can get it filled on Amazon.
On GoodRx, the Ozempic pen is available.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, the Ozempic 8 milligram pen is widely available. We're not seeing any shortages there.
Oh, okay.
If we go to the 1 milligram, then it goes up to $500 a month. And so they're $300 a month is a little cheaper. But the thing I'd say is if you're on Ro meds and you're on the 0.25 or the 0.5, you're better off getting the actual Ozempic, FDA approved, and using a counting click approach to it. If we look at tirzepatide, we can go all the way up to 15 milligrams of tirzepatide using the coupon for $550 a month. On Ro, it's $450 a month. And that's at the lowest doses.
Right.
And so I think that when I look at these, I don't see that they're that much less expensive. And so you're taking this risk of this compounded drug, but you're really not saving a huge amount of money. You're probably most likely too, the way it works is a lot of people start these meds and don't finish them. And so they're probably getting people on these higher priced programs at low doses. They'd be better off just working through their primary care doctor, doing a Ozempic pen, counting some clicks, and would probably be a lot cheaper that way. They'd use your insurance for the visits and $125 a month for the starter, $250 for the 0.5. So, you could definitely get going up and running with your PCP, I think, for much less money than these programs. And so I think when you're looking at the compounded stuff, really do your homework and compare it. Because if you can get FDA approved meds, same price, that to me is a no-brainer. There's no reason to use a compounded med instead of the FDA-approved stuff. You're taking risk unnecessarily. You're getting it in units, which means you may not even be getting what you think you're getting. So I'm looking at these two programs. It's not something that I would recommend out there for anybody. There may be other places that do compounding for less expensively than this, but I think I'd be cautious looking at these programs.
Do you help people count clicks?
We do. Yeah, no, I have no problem helping people count clicks. The big problem with that is that there's a couple of issues. The first is the manufacturer, I believe, recommends disposing of the pen after either 2 or 3 months once you open it. And so you have to be careful with that. There's a tiny bit of risk with that, but I think if a patient decides to accept that risk, I wouldn't refuse to work with them. I just counsel them. I do bariatric surgery. There's risk. I mean, everybody's taking risk. There's no way around this. There's risk of not doing anything. So I look at that as a very small risk for patients. The big issue is that they give you 5 pen needles And if you count clicks, you might need 10, 12, 16 pen needles. You could buy 100 pen needles for $8 on Amazon.
Easy.
Most states, you don't need a prescription. So yeah, we work with counting clicks with patients, and I don't have a problem. We can even get things less expensive through our quote unquote creative dosing strategies.
So it sounds to me like if somebody's considering or even on the Henry or Roe compounded meds, they're already paying all of this. Sounds like they could potentially be a good candidate for the Pound of Cure Platinum program.
It's possible that it might actually be cheaper to work through us on that. Yeah, it's certainly possible.
Something to consider.
Yeah. All right, Sierra, what questions do we have this week?
Okay. First question is from one of our Instagram reels from Charles. His GLP-1 has definitely gotten him back on track. He says it's quite frustrating, though, that next year Blue Cross and Blue Shield will not be covering it. What's your take on this, and do you think there will be any changes?
Well, there's always going to be changes, right? I mean, I think we absolutely know that whatever things are now, they're going to change. We've been prescribing GLP-1 medications pretty regularly for over 2 years now. And I swear every quarter we have to change something. So this is always changing. I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to, because I don't believe that Blue Cross across the board, every Blue Cross plan has said we're not covering these meds. The big news I've heard out of Blue Cross is from Blue Cross of Michigan. And the way Blue Cross works, it's not state by state. There's a couple of states that bind together, but there may be 30 or 40 different Blue Cross companies. And so there may be 30 or 40 different policies for Blue Cross. So if you have Blue Cross of Arizona, it doesn't matter what Blue Cross of Michigan is doing. It's totally different. The rules for bariatric surgery are different. All the coverages are different companies, different entities. So, what I've heard from Blue Cross Michigan is they've changed their criteria and essentially they've made the criteria almost identical to what we see for bariatric surgery. So anybody who's had bariatric surgery knows you got to do 3 months, 6 months, and one insurance company is 6 months and another is 2 months, and some almost all require psych eval, some require this blood test, others require clearance by a pulmonologist. They just they sit in a room, come up with crazy rules, put it in the policy, and then we run around trying to follow these rules.
Add a hoop.
Yeah, exactly. So Blue Cross of Michigan has essentially changed their policy to very similar to bariatric surgery. They've made it very restrictive. I'm not aware that any Blue Cross policy has said we're not covering these meds at all. But let's just say they did. I'll just run a little thought experiment by everybody. If there was no insurance coverage for this, and all of the, not for diabetes, but just for the treatment of obesity, it was only self-pay, that would probably increase access to the medications. Maybe not at first while we have some of these shortages. We probably would still see a lot of problems, but I believe that we would see the market expand. We'd see a couple of different companies start competing on price. We'd get some market forces like we get in everywhere else. Like we went to buy a new TV the other day. Have you bought a TV lately?
No.
They are so cheap. It's crazy. I remember when I was a kid, a TV was like a huge purchase. It was like a huge amount of money. You can get like a 50-inch TV for like $299 or something. I mean, they're so inexpensive because there's these powerful market forces. There's lots of competition. The technology is getting better.
Right.
Medicine follows the exact opposite rule, right? Everything just gets more expensive every year in medicine, up, twice the rate of inflation every year. It never gets cheaper to have healthcare in this country. It has not for 20 plus years since I've been a doctor. And so my argument is maybe the insurance companies artificially keep the price high, and that if we made this only self-pay, then we would see actually less access. And so people are going to say to me, well, but Dr. Weiner, my insurance pays and I get it for $25. Well, that's great, but your insurance company is being paid by your employer, and your employer is paying $1,000 to you instead of paying you $1,000 in wages. Mm-hmm. So if this was brought out of it, that could allow for insurance prices to go down if the insurance companies would allow them. But again, some market forces could allow insurance prices to go down. People would get more in wages that they could then use to buy GLP-1 medications. So I'm not certain that insurance coverage for all is the best approach, because the pharma companies will get as much as they can. And we've got the PBMs dipping in and taking huge fees. That all disappears if this is all self-pay for obesity coverage. So I'm not saying that no insurances should ever pay for that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that when insurance doesn't cover it, it may not be the worst thing for your ultimate access. It will impact it now, but we just talked before about counting clicks and some of our creative dosing strategies and some of the things we do to bring these medicines into an affordable range for people. And that's always an option. So I don't know that I would be terrified if insurance is no longer covering these meds. I think it hurt us in the short run, but within 6 months, we'd probably start to see some better options out there. So my 2 cents on that. All right, Sierra, what's our next question?
Okay, this one is from our Metabolic Reset Diet class from the nutrition program. It says unlimited fruit, but my sugars have been way higher the past 3 days. I am diabetic and I'm concerned that I might be eating too much fruit.
Good question, because I do talk about fruit. I know there's a lot of fear around fruit, especially with people who have a history of like the keto diet.
Fruit fear.
Fruit fear. I love that. We haven't used that term before. Fruit fear.
Yeah.
Right. So as you may know, on the Metabolic Reset Diet, you are the listener, not you, my co-host, because you wrote the freaking book. But the fruit is unlimited on the Metabolic Reset Diet. However, the caveat I always like to mention is you need to be eating more vegetables than fruit.
Yeah, that's a great adjustment to it. I like that.
So that's my first recommendation is, are you eating more vegetables than fruit? And if the answer is no, then let's flip-flop that.
Right.
And then if you are diabetic and you are struggling with maybe higher blood sugars when you're eating fruit, never eat naked fruit. So what I mean by naked fruit is fruit by itself without a protein, because adding that protein in with it. So maybe it's, yes, you have a banana, but that banana by itself, if you're just having that as a snack as a diabetic, that might shoot your blood sugar up. But if you're having that banana with some almonds, then that protein helps to slow that rate of increased blood sugar. Or if you're having an apple, maybe put some peanut butter with it. Or if you're having berries, maybe you have it with some Greek yogurt. So you can see the theme of never eating naked fruit. So pairing that fruit with the protein and making sure that you're eating a much larger volume of vegetables than the fruit. And that can definitely help, not only manage those blood sugars, but if you are experiencing a, maybe slower rate of weight loss as well, that could help.
Yeah. Every study I've seen shows that the more fruit you eat, the lower your A1C is. So the only places where I've seen that your A1C goes up is when they lump fruit and fruit juice together.
Oh, like in a smoothie where they use fruit juice as the base?
Or the study says how much, when they measure fruit, they measure fruit juice and fruit together.
It's like not the same.
It's so not the same. That's the only time I've ever seen there be any evidence that it may be actually bad for your sugars. But every study I've ever seen says the more fruit you eat, the lower your blood sugar.
Well, and something that you say too is like you never see somebody who's gotten overweight by eating too much fruit.
No.
So
no.
End the fruit fear.
Yes, absolutely. All right. What's our last question, Sierra?
Okay. Final question is from our YouTube video, episode 20. I'm a Roux-en-Y gastric bypass patient. I'm down to 121 from 205.
Wow.
I want to be 110. I want to try Mounjaro or Wegovy. Am I a candidate? The food noise is back.
So 110 pounds, we don't have the height, but I'm guessing it's not, 4'5" or 4'6". I mean, assuming that this person likely has a BMI of, mid 20s, high 20s, depending on their height, maybe low 20s. I think we have to look at these medications and recognize that they are not for 10 pounds of weight loss. And that these medications are for patients with clinically significant obesity. Now, if this person were to gain from 120 to 130 then I might change my answer on this, which is that using these medications to preserve weight loss after bariatric surgery makes a lot of sense. But to get those final last 10 pounds, because in my mind, I don't believe that these medication, that final 10 pounds is going to improve their health much at all. I really would turn, if this patient was in my office, I would say, I really don't think that is the right medication for you. Even self-paying and whatever, however they do it, I would not be super in favor of that. I would 100% turn them over to you. So Zoe, what does this person do to lose those last 10 pounds? Yeah.
My first question would be, why that number?
There you go.
This is a discussion that we had in one of our support groups earlier this week, and I think it sparks a lot of really great thought. Ask yourself, you have that number 110 in your head.
Yeah.
But why?
Where'd it come from?
Where's
Right.
that number?
Yeah.
Right? Is it, that's what I weighed in high school, or that's what puts me in the normal I don't think that this applies for this specific patient, but in the discussion, it was, that's what would put me into the normal category for BMI.
Right.
So there, or, I don't know why, I just like that number. I think I should weigh that number. So I would do a little bit of digging in terms of, why is that number significant? And would you rather see a specific number on the scale, or would you rather feel good in your body, feel confident in your skin, like the way you look, have energy, etc.? So really kind of doing some soul searching on what's the significance of that number and how important it actually is to you to reach that number. And if at that point, it all checks out and it's like, okay, we want to hit that number, then we can potentially look at, of course, your nutrition adjustments, potentially your exercise. Maybe it's not a matter of hitting a specific number on the scale, but maybe it is, I don't really love the way that I look in the mirror at the 121. So maybe it's more so a conversation of changing body composition,
Right.
which would be resulting in muscle building and losing fat, which lifting weights would be helpful with that, making sure your nutrition is dialed in with that. And maybe your weight stays at 121, but maybe you have a very different look in the mirror with that change of body composition. So there's a lot to kind of dig into, but my first and foremost question would be having you reflect on, why do you want to be 110?
Yeah, there's so many good thoughts there. I think the other thing that I see too is this, you're in this mindset of like, I'm 205, then I'm 204, then I'm 203, and you're getting on the scale, and there's this moment of happiness every time you get on the scale and the number's going down, the number's going down. At some point that ends, right? The goal weight is not zero. At some point, the scale will stop providing that reinforcement. And it's possible that this person's just looking for those last little bits of reinforcement, when instead they should be finding them in other places. You talk about this, I think, in your Measuring Success support group, right?
And actually, that's where this conversation stemmed from, was on Monday's session of the Measuring Success class, or support session. We were discussing about why that number. So that's where that came from. But what you just said of seeing that reinforcement, another piece of the conversation was, I feel like the reason why I step on the scale every day and obsess about it is because I'm chasing the high.
Right.
Chasing the high of seeing a lower number. Because like what you were saying, from 205, you get that positive reinforcement. So it's, how can we, again, have a reframe? How can we shift that focus to, where can I obtain positive reinforcement and that feeling of success and pride in my journey, aside from the scale?
And it's usually exercise, right? Can you do a real push-up? How many push-ups can you do? Count those, right? Because you can go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 10 to 20. You can, there you go. There's going to be a huge, here's a huge amount. Like, how fast can you run a mile?
Exactly.
All of these things start, it's time to shift at some point. Once you get to the end of that honeymoon phase, it's time to shift the measurement away from the scale and toward the activities, the behaviors, the exercise goals.
Well, and like you said, goals. So it's, maybe you've had this goal, you're working towards weight loss, you have like that drive to reach a goal. You reach the goal, and then it's like, okay, now what? Now we need to, again, shift that perspective, have a new non-scale related goal to be working towards. Maybe it's, I want to run a 5K.
Right.
Maybe it's, I want to do a full push-up. Maybe it's, I want to, whatever it is, and having that, and it's okay to reach that goal and then find another goal, you know? That's what's going to help propel you on this change of a lifestyle for the rest of your life, rather than viewing it as just another diet that you lose weight and it doesn't actually stick as a long-lasting lifestyle change.
Yeah, I love it. All right, great episode.
Whew.
Great episode.
Getting all fired up.
Yes. All right, so this podcast is produced by Sierra Miller and Rhiannon Griffin, and the editing is done by AutoGrow. A special thanks to our guest, Deborah, and congratulations on her success. And if you enjoyed the podcast, check us out on social media. Share the podcast with a friend who you think might enjoy it. Check out our website, join our online nutrition program, or even our platinum program if you're looking for some personal assistance. We will see you next time.